Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 19th. Well, here we are with the same image as yesterday. No tropical cyclones are active again as we enter the 292nd day of the year. The storm count for the season remains at 81. Of course, 92 is the average that we see by the end of the year on December 31st. Kicking it off with the Atlantic, it's day 141 of the season here, and it remains just the same image as it was yesterday. No rest in the next 5 days, continuing what has been a relatively inactive month. Could be the longest October streak of no activity since 2007. In the Eastern Pacific, there is an area of interest here with a 50% chance of formation now, and it could become something over the next several days, although that development is expected after the day 2 mark, so it is not going to be until probably the second half of the week. In the Western Pacific, we have a new area of interest, a 10% chance for the moment. There's been some pretty good ensemble support for something trying to approach the Philippines, but the only apparent model supporting it is the GFS, which really seems to go completely bullish on it, taking it to Category 3 before striking Vietnam and the Haina Peninsula. In the North Indian Ocean, we have nothing going on here. And no systems are expected to develop in the next 5 days here, so thankfully everything is remaining fairly quiet around the wide world of tropics, although we will have to watch the Eastern Pacific area of interest for sure. Of course, there is nothing on the track forecast side of things in the next 84 hours, as there are no systems active to track, no invest or anything that has more than a 0% chance in the next 48 hours, so of course we are not able to use the screen another day. Moving on over into the satellite imagery side of things that I will be displaying in a hot second here. And you can see what's going on in the North Atlantic. Still that very large extratropical low that's been still getting itself much more disorganized, with the frontal system that's been attached to it slowly receding to the north ever so slowly. Other than that, there's another large frontal system that is crossing and passing to the east of Bermuda at the moment, but nothing really else going on. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see what's going on here. A few disturbances that really aren't doing much of anything or able to do anything really. The area of interest that we're watching is to the east of where that map goes, although you should start seeing it more in the next day or two. In the Western Pacific, you can see what's going on here. That area of interest that we're watching is probably going to be coming from that complex area of showers and thunderstorms that is a few hundred miles to the east of the Mariana Islands there. Other than that, it's relatively dry across the basin with nothing really too bad going on in the Philippines and some normal activity going on up there in the higher latitudes. In the North Indian Ocean, you can see what's going on here. A pretty interesting storm that has been crossing into eastern India over the last few hours here. Other than that, it is the same as usual in the Bay of Bengal and in the Arabian Sea, of course the latter of which is dry. And as we still have no invest or storms to focus on, that brings us over to the Norwegian Sea, where there is a giant extratropical thingamajig that happens to exist. But of course, you wouldn't be seeing the best satellite things here, so you see what appears to be about 5 different satellites trying to work on bringing the Norwegian Sea to life. It's always great seeing these kinds of satellite imagery. In the Eastern Pacific sea surface temperature side of things, you can see what's going on here. 27 to 29 degrees Celsius temperatures dominating the region, although there is some areas that are starting to cool down a bit. The Gulf of Mexico remains around 27 to 28, Caribbean around 28 to 29, and of course the main development region remaining around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, and the Western Atlantic still profiting off those warmer Gulf Stream waters. Other than that, we're still going to be seeing those temperatures slowly recede as the season draws to an end next month. In the North Indian Ocean, the temperatures remain around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius in the Bay of Bengal and around 27 to 29 in the Arabian Sea. And as you head into the Western Pacific, it's around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius throughout the majority of the basin here. In the Southern Hemisphere, we're still looking at those temperatures slowly warming up around 26 to 28 in those areas you typically see tropical cyclones form, so we should probably start seeing the first signs of activity, at least good chances of activity this time, in the next month or two. Here are the sea surface temperature anomalies. Of course, we are in that official La Nina now, so you can really see how pronounced it's gotten. In the Atlantic, the temperatures are still above average. In the Eastern Pacific, it's slightly above average, and in the Western Pacific and North Indian Ocean, it's still near or slightly above average. The only temperatures that we're seeing below average are, of course, in the Central Pacific, in the Northern Hemisphere at least. On this day in 2016, we had two systems active: Super Typhoon Haima, which was coming off its peak of 165 miles an hour, still a Cat 5 momentarily though, and would eventually weaken into a Category 4 before making landfall in the northern Philippines, bringing upon $970 million of damage and 19 fatalities. There was also Tropical Depression Sarika, and not mentioned here, but there was the extratropical remnants of Nicole that was near Greenland at this point. So you can find more of our On This Day products powered by Cyclone History. Their Twitter is on the bottom bar below. Well, that brings us over to the next names in the Atlantic. We are still looking out for Wanda, followed by Adria. In the Eastern Pacific, the next two names here are Rick and Sandra. And in the Central Pacific, while there may be a nightmare on Elm Street, we can tell you right now that we will not be seeing Hone for the next 5 nights. In the Western Pacific, the next two names here are Malo, followed by Nieto. And in the North Indian Ocean, the next two names here are Jawad, followed by Asani. Moving on over into the Southern Hemisphere, the next two names in the Southwestern Indian Ocean are Anna, followed by Betsy, right? In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We'll be back for another Tropical Weather Bulletin and our shenanigans, with there being nothing active tomorrow night.